that you have to make a change before it's too late. Before you destroy yourself or someone else. And I believe you can change. You'll find your path. And when you're ready, I will be there to help you walk that path.
It's all over, man. After more than a decade of being a television mainstay, the saga of Saul Goodman has concluded, and his final act made for what I believe is one of the best series finales of all time. How he got there, why it's one of the best finales, and the implications of that finale are the subjects I'm going to be diving into in this video. When Better Call Saul was first released, I was skeptical. Breaking Bad was and remains one of my favorite shows, but I wasn't sold on the idea that a spin-off could match the original's quality in a way that would justify its existence. Saul Goodman was a fun character in the original series, but he didn't have much substance. He was a caricature of a slimy, shady lawyer utilized for some comic relief. In other words, not dynamic enough to anchor his own series. Obviously, I was wrong, and I've never been more thrilled to admit that. For many, myself included, the jury is still out on whether Better Call Saul exceeded the bar Vince Gilligan set with Breaking Bad. Regardless, the fact alone that Gilligan and co-writer and co-creator Peter Gould fleshed 3 dimensions out of Jimmy McGill and crafted an emotional whirlwind of a conclusion for him is an impressive feat. Impressive still is that Gould and Gilligan accomplished that feat while taking a dramatically different approach with Better Call Saul. But that's a topic for another video. The Better Call Saul finale begins with a flashback, the first of several confrontations with ghosts from Jimmy's past. We're brought back to the Bagman episode from season 5. Mike and Jimmy wandering through the desert in search of an exit. Stopping to rest, the two talk about a hypothetical time machine and how they'd use it to right past wrongs, broaching the theme of regret that seeps so heavily through the entire episode. The sparse exchange of dialogue shows us a lot about these two characters. Mike regrets accepting his first bribe, the choice that sends him down his bad choice road. Jimmy, however, shields his true regrets from Mike, and at this point in the show likely from himself, showing that he's become completely integrated with the Saul Goodman persona. Knowing what the future has in store for him, this is a solemn send-off for Mike. The writers leverage our knowledge of Mike's future trajectory to present a template for how Jimmy's story could end in the black and white timeline. He could accept that change isn't possible, that his fate is sealed and remain on the path of his bad choice road, living to scheme and connive another day, perpetually dodging accountability for his crimes. This is the path Saul's dubious choices have set him on, and he follows it through and beyond the end of the Breaking Bad timeline. Through the bleak black and white cinematography and visual symmetry shared by scenes in the Cinnabon and in prison, it's apparent that life in exile as Gene Takovic is more or less a soft incarceration. The vibrancy that defined his character had been totally drained from him, and not even slipping back into his Saul Goodman ways can restore the color. Still, eking out a miserable existence in relative freedom is preferable to the suffering requisite for redemption. Saul's crimes left a permanent mark. Life as Gene is his punishment, and we know he is burdened by regrets, even if he won't share them. But what's the point of having regrets, if they only bring you pain and can't compel you to change, and only hinder you coming out on top?
Why have regrets at all? What's the point? You're just going to keep hurting people? Jimmy, this is what you do. You hurt people over and over. If you're not going to change your behavior, and you won't, why not just skip the whole exercise? You're going to hurt everyone around you. You can't help it. So stop apologizing and accept it.
Saul still can't muster up any meaningful regrets in his flashback scene with Walter. Instead of taking accountability for the choices that led him down a path of regret like Mike does, Walt attributes his deepest regret his departure from gray matter to an external circumstance outside of his control. He missed out on becoming a legitimate millionaire and earning legitimate power and prestige by no fault of his own. It was the artful conspiracy of Gretchen and Eliot that ultimately led to Walt's transformation into Heisenberg. After he's caught in Nebraska, Saul continues down his slippery path, taking a page from Walt's playbook. He laundered money and played consigliere to Walter White not for the financial gain, but out of fear of what would happen if he refused. Saul bears no responsibility for any of the fallout from Heisenberg's reign. He was just another one of the victims. At least that's the tale he needs just one juror to believe. We start to believe that perhaps what Chuck said to him is the truth. He can't change. He can't help himself. He'll go to his grave as Slipping Jimmy.
Jimmy, you can't help yourself. Chuck knew it. You were born that way.
Enter Kim Wexler.
One of the smartest and most promising human beings I've ever known. And this is the life you choose.
Following the death of Howard, Kim's moral compass showed her the raw consequences of her fun with Jimmy. She punished herself by quitting the law, breaking up with Jimmy, and suffering through a life of soul-crushing mundanity, a self-imposed exile that wasn't unlike Jimmy's life as Gene. It's only when she switches paths and confesses to the true circumstances of Howard's death and accepts the full ramifications of that confession that she begins to reintegrate with her true self and rekindles her passion for the law. The news that Kim confessed to their collective crimes and opened herself up in the process to losing everything she has and ever will have starts to turn the gears inside of Saul's head. For Jimmy, Kim has always stood as a pillar of morality, a pillar that gradually crumbled the longer she resided around the sphere of Saul's shadiness. Despite his flaws and slipperiness, Kim has always stood in Jimmy's corner and repeatedly went to bat for him in times when his brother plotted against him and in times when he was otherwise alone. She alone saw his potential for good, his potential to change paths. So it understandably follows that the repressed guilt he feels for leading her morally astray bubbles up when he hears that she essentially sacrifices herself in order to clear her conscience. The magnitude of the confession, coupled with his love and admiration for Kim, sends a shockwave through Saul's system. It inspires him to do the same. Saul's final scheme is to lure Kim into the courthouse so that she can watch from the gallery as he confesses and takes full ownership of his crimes, throwing away his sweetheart deal with the state in favor of a clear conscience. Saul Goodman is no more. Jimmy McGill, however, takes his first stride down the path of redemption. The final flashback scene takes us back to before the series pilot. It's a wistful reflection on Jimmy's relationship with his brother. In the scene, Chuck seems genuine about discussing Jimmy's practice and his clients, but Jimmy writes him off. He knows where Chuck stands on his profession, but yet still goes out of his way to deliver his groceries daily. This scene is a solid microcosm for their entire relationship. It's clear that there is some frustration here between the brothers, but also love. Jimmy always greatly loved Chuck and admired him for his legal prowess. His brother's prestige as a lawyer is a chief reason why Jimmy becomes a lawyer himself in the first place. Just as Jimmy is about to leave, Chuck tells him that,
If you don't like where you're heading, there's no shame in going back and changing your path.
in the context of the scene, it's likely that what Chuck means is that it's not too late for Jimmy to change his path to something that doesn't involve him being a lawyer. In the context of the finale, however, this is the line that unearths Jimmy's path to redemption. This scene highlights Jimmy's biggest regret. If he had a time machine, he would have gone back and accepted his brother's counsel. He would have tried to mend their relationship as best he could. The bitter rift that widens between the two of them in later seasons contributes greatly to Jimmy's degradation into Saul Goodman. Although he's always been Slippin' Jimmy, he looked up to his dedicated and morally sound brother, and with the right nurturing and guidance from Chuck, it's possible he never would have devolved into Saul in the first place. Jimmy replies to his brother,
When have you ever changed your path?
In terms of their frayed relationship, the brothers are at a stalemate, neither willing to blink first. They always end up having the same conversation. If he had a time machine, Jimmy, and Chuck probably as well, would have traveled back in time to have a different conversation with his brother. But, of course, time travel is a real and theoretical impossibility. The sting of regret is the only thing that's real. The past is already set in stone. The only way to address regrets from the past is through action in the present. All Jimmy wanted from his brother was to make him proud. While Chuck wasn't around to see it, taking full ownership of his crimes and fully surrendering himself to the rule of law would have undoubtedly earned Chuck's approval. Jimmy's powerful action proved Chuck wrong. It also disproved the fatalistic view of the vast majority of anti-hero shows. Jimmy was capable of positive change, but that change comes at the steepest of prices. I believe the Better Call Saul finale is one of the best in television history because it was able to set Jimmy down that path of redemption successfully. It doesn't affirm a morally nihilistic viewpoint. It doesn't trap our protagonist in a vicious cycle of sociopathic behavior and simply shrugs its shoulders. It doesn't give Jimmy a happy ending where he can have his cake and eat it too. The path of redemption Jimmy chooses to take reminded me of the main character from Fyodor Dostoevsky's novel Crime and Punishment. The novel's protagonist is an impoverished university student liberated from the limitations of morality by a nihilistic worldview without any prevailing principles. He soon turns to murder to support himself financially. Several hundred pages of emotional anguish and mental deterioration later, and he confesses to his crime and pursues that path of redemption in a Siberian prison, a choice that implies an easing of past regrets and a spiritually richer life waiting for him ahead. For both works of fiction, redemption isn't a commodity that is cheaply bought. It requires suffering. It requires an 86-year sentence at the Alcatraz of the Rockies. It requires a harsh acknowledgement that there are principles and forces in the world larger than yourself. Most difficult of all, it requires a separation from the people that we care about the most.